Welcome to another edition of More Throwing Down Some Heavy Light. My name is Jamal Binding. I'm the chair of the board of directors. And what we've done is from time to time bring different community people and leaders and experts and people who are grass tops as well as people who are grassroots and people who are in the know to talk about various issues. And today we have with us Brother Melvin Muhammad, who's a lifelong resident of Omaha. He has worked in various capacities in our community and different organizations. He's originally, I think, from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I saw that. But he basically spent most of his time here in Omaha. Tulsa is similar to Omaha in regards of how they treat African Americans. We know about the Tulsa situation. He is also a member and works with the Nation of Islam, and he's running for the Omaha Public School Board, which is a wonderful opportunity to change some of the systems and things in our community. He's running in District 2. I met him when he worked, I think, with the Department of Social Services years ago. And I might have met him some other place, but I remember our encounter and our exchanges and conversations when he's associated with that organization. He's run for office before, so this is not his first rodeo. And he understands issues that affects the African American community. And that's one of the things that we do at More is bring people in who understands things that go with race, equity, and all those other wonderful things that are related to diversity. I invited him to talk about his upcoming race and issues affecting African Americans in Omaha. And he is most proud that he participated in the Million Men March that was held in DC many years ago. And so we may talk a little bit about that at some point. So first, Brother Melvin, can you tell the viewers a little bit more about yourself?
You're right, Jamal. I was born and spent maybe 5 to 6 years in Tulsa, and my family moved to Omaha in the 1960s. I grew up here. I went to St. Benedict Catholic Church. My mother was seeking an education for her children that was far beyond the reach of, at that point in time, a segregated Omaha. I went from 4th grade to 8th grade in Catholic school at St. Benedict. And in the 9th year, I entered Central. The problem that I had when I entered Central was that in a parochial school, I learned much more about the dynamics of education than I did in the, say, 1st grade to 4th in public schools. And so when I got to Central, I was far ahead of the classmates at that point in time. I entered the 9th grade and I got through that relatively easy, got to the 10th grade. And then I saw or felt, as I told my mother, Mom, they're not teaching what I'm used to learning, and therefore it's much more slow. And so as time progressed, I went through school there. She asked me one day, she said, son, you never bring home any books. I said, Mom, I can complete the lessons that they're giving me in study hall. So that way I got free time when I come home to do what I want to do and to play sports. So it wasn't that challenging, although I did flunk 1 grade the first semester, and that was in geometry. And that I attributed that to the fact that I was sitting in the back of the class and I wasn't paying attention most of the time because it was slow learning for me. And if you're teaching children that are much more advanced in being taught, when you teach them slowly, they go to sleep or they don't pay attention or they're considered to be attention deficit. Went to the Air Force when I graduated and attended some college courses, finally graduated from college. I have a bachelor's degree in social work. I've held, as you said, several jobs in the community, from the state to a private industry. I'm a behavioral health specialist by trade. The last job that I worked at was at First National Bank. I'm not trying to give them a plug, but I find that banking is a tremendous advantage when you understand it. And if you don't understand it, it's a tremendous disadvantage. So I won't go any further about that. I'm ready to engage in your questions. So let's get this started.
There we go. As a lifelong resident of the educational system, and I've been a critic of it, I'm not sure in terms of other folks, what will you bring to the district currently that's not being offered by our existing regime?
Well, I was asked a question on one of the radio talk shows or internet talk shows by a call-in chat chimer, and they asked me what they were going to do if I became the board member. I said, I'll make sure that the children get an education. And the follow-up question was, how are you going to protect certain children? And I responded to the lady as saying, look, my job as a board member is to protect all the children and not children by labels, all the children. So the thing that I really want to take a look at is how we're spending money and why we have a tremendous deficit of learning, graduation, and test scores throughout the district, and it appears as though we're failing in 3 areas. That's English, that's math, and that's science. I have some figures here that I could read off to you about the concern that I have, and I'm more than willing to do that. But I just want to show up. I'm not looking to be controversial, but I'm not looking to sign off on everything that goes on that I see currently happening at the Omaha School Board.
When one community member got on the school board, I asked if she would get the superintendent to host meetings in the community forums and so on with real African Americans in North Omaha. That didn't really happen. And one of my concerns is we sometimes bring these outsiders in. I call them carpetbaggers, sometimes Negro carpetbaggers, and they, again, will not set foot in our community, and particularly without their entourage or without just engaging regular grassroots folks. I'm aware of the 2 highest paid previous social service directors in Lincoln, to my knowledge, never had a community forum, and they were both dark-skinned administrators. And so my question to you somewhat is, how can we help our community address some of these issues? And I know you mentioned data, but how can we deal with some of these issues to make sure that our people are engaged? And again, you have data, you posted data related to that, but how can we get more interactive with grass stops and people in our community, which has not really happened with this current superintendent or even the board for that matter, and doing in district elections? So help me with that one.
In early March, Jamal, I was invited, as I was told by the superintendent's office, that she interviews all candidates or all incoming board members to get her take on how valuable that individual will be, how helpful they may be, or how cooperative they may be. She asked me the same question: what would you do to enhance your work on the school board? My first response was that I would probably go out into the community and talk with the constituents to get their feel of what they think is happening, as opposed to what is happening, be a conduit from the community to the board, to the superintendent, from the superintendent to the board, back to the community. The superintendent told me, well, that was her job to do. Well, I, like you, have not seen anyone in the community to discuss, at least the North Omaha community, to discuss anything dealing with the children, whether they be Black, brown, or poor white children in this community. I have not seen one representative from the board of the Omaha Public School District attend or call for any meeting to discuss with this community and the constituents in the community. So that's the first thing that I would do, is establish a connection between that board and this community.
Wow, it's fascinating, because one of the criticisms back in the day, those of us who were part of old school, we would have the superintendent come out at least once a year, twice a year, and he would bring maybe just a few of his helpers, but he was largely in charge. Lately, these folks all hold up in that nest up there in that viper's pit, as Ernie might call some of these places. And again, our community is going downhill, and we have no input into that. I'm going to switch up and ask a different kind of question. You've been placing information on your website dealing with goals program, and also on your Facebook and so on. And I know you've been concerned with school truancy and absenteeism. Why is that important to us as African Americans or people who live in certain districts who have a high percentage of these issues? Why is that important?
If we don't show up for class, there's several reasons why this could happen, Jamal. As I said earlier, how we teach children plays a very intricate part in educating them. If you've got a subject and that subject does not help the student, when I say help the student, if that student does not see him or herself in the narrative of that subject matter that you're teaching, then they fail to pay attention. What's in it for me? We are a people that want to see ourselves progress. And when you're teaching a class on any subject and there's no representation of Black, brown, and even poor white, it's very hard to pay attention and live with that direction, because you don't see yourself. If you take a picture of a class of students and you present it to them after that picture has been taken, what do you think is the first thing they look for? They look for themselves. Same premise. If you're going to teach a subject and you cannot communicate to the children in the classroom that regardless of what ethnicity they are, if it's not a subject where that child, those children can see themselves in the makeup of that curriculum, then that's a curriculum that you're not going to be able to get over to students that want to see themselves and then learn from those who taught the curriculum, the subject and the importance of it. It's important that we are in school. Why? Because if you don't go to school, if you miss 20 days or more in a 182-day school program, you get referred to the district attorney. Now, there's some steps along the way. Intervention is what it's called. And you have these individuals that are 501c3s, many of them, and some of them do well, but some of them don't do well. And what I find in this community, Ajamal, is that we keep funding agencies. Every time funding comes out, the same people trot out to get more money to do what they were supposed to do when they first got the money. And then they say, well, this is increasing. Well, why is it increasing? Is not your method of helping working? You never justify or answer the question why you need more money. You tell us that it's ballooning up. Why is it ballooning up? You're the interventionist. Either your program works or it doesn't, but you're just fleecing the coffers of school board, city, state, and federal government to get more money to do what? Our children are still absent from school. They're still creating issues for themselves in the community. Recently, there was a shooting the other night, a drive-by shooting, okay? There was some beefing going on in one of the community centers. But what I didn't understand by reading the news article, because I wasn't there, as the security guards are trying to get the children out that were beefing, who were they beefing with? Did the people they were beefing with leave and go get in their car and then drive by and tat, 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 tat? That was never explained. It appeared to say that while the security guards were handling the people inside, it appears that someone slipped out the door, got in their car and got their pistol or whatever it may have been, and drove by and started shooting. Now that's being investigated by the police, but things do not happen isolated. They don't happen in a vacuum. And where there's smoke, there's fire. What took place inside the community center led to what took place outside of it.
Wow. One of the things that concerned me is that with that incident, we don't know all the details today, but it does sound like we need some conflict resolution and some skills of how you mediate and deal with issues. I'm going to switch up and ask you kind of a different question. I had a chance to participate, and also I've seen some of the situations where many of the families have, again, go before the school board and talk and so on. I watched the last two Omaha Public School Board meetings, and many of the decisions and backslapping or backdoor activities occur in those meetings. Obviously, they have pre meetings, especially their consent agendas. Some of that stuff they've rehearsed and all that, and they can tell the way they talk. They all say positive things about OPS, not critical things. Not to say that you have to be negative, but it was that. And also, their legal advisors over the years have told them, including the ones who supported segregation, that they shouldn't talk to parents. And so you go there and you talk, and people don't like going to board meetings because they don't respond or they don't answer your questions or anything. My question somewhat is, why would you go to a meeting to testify or offer comments if you have a dysfunctional board, school board, who can't talk to the public? And as I've just alluded to, they're not going to community. I also noticed you were at the last board meeting, but talk to me a little bit about how we can change that or what we should do to make it much more better, because right now it seems dysfunctional.
Well, the first thing we have to do is decide what the term meeting actually means. If you're going to have conversation, it's a one-way conversation, then there's no meeting. You have to have deliberative dialogue. And what I find is that with deliberative dialogue, then everybody gets an opportunity to express themselves. Even if you put time limits on those expressions, everybody that wants to speak can speak. Also, it allows the board or the board members to speak, but I find this to be interesting. They speak, the board members, but they speak only in the larger area and not specifically to any one individual. They're speaking about the quasi accomplishments and things that they've done that are supposed to help the school district, but never, as you're right, never engaging in a conversation about the day-to-day problems in the school that parents have to deal with when school is released and that child comes home and starts talking about their day. As a parent, you want to go discuss that, but there's no discussion that mediates it satisfactorily. Okay, and so we have this issue is that they're talking to a board and the board sits there, and if they're listening, it does not appear to me at times that they are. There's been plenty of conversations that parents are talking about something that happened with their child, and the board is just in the back of the, yeah, they're in the back of the office.
Yeah, they chit chatting when the parents talk.
There are several individuals that come religiously, and I say that delicately, to talk about their observation of the board and the programs that have been implemented in the board, by the board, and in the school. The new thing that was implemented was the code of conduct. And as I understand it, it's written where if two people are fighting, you're not allowed to defend yourself. Now, that means someone is supposed to take a whipping. I find that, you know, most of the Black children, most of the brown children, and even poor white children are going to fight or try to defend themselves.
Right.
But you're both going to get expelled depending on how well you're able to defend yourself.
Right.
Okay. So for my children, when they were in school, they were well able to defend themselves because I taught them martial arts. I can remember a time when my middle child was squirted in the face with a bottle. He didn't know it was water. He thought it was some chemical. And he did what he had to do, and they were going to expel him. I said, well, you expel him, then we're going to sue you. And then the parent of the child that my son accosted said he was going to sue us. I said, that's fine. We're going to sue you. We're going to sue the school because the school failed to protect my child against your child. My child was only defending himself. So you do all you want to do. It never came to anything. They let him stay home for 3 days, but he never got expelled because they knew that that child did nothing wrong other than defend himself. So I don't teach aggression. I teach self-defense. But if you want to be the aggressor, you bring some, you're going to get some.
Well, and that's part of the challenge with the school system. I don't know what kind of idiot thinking is going on. Again, I didn't call nobody an idiot, but I said thinky, that you're saying somebody should take a whooping. And again, why are we not dealing with conflict resolution? Why are we not dealing with some of the challenges these young people are facing instead of talking about always expelling them and they still get their tax money off of each one of these children and so on? I want to come back to a point that I made a little bit earlier to kind of allude to. I attended the public schools most of my life here in Omaha, and my children also did. And it was a challenging situation, particularly as an African-American, particularly African-American male. I have not seen fair treatment of African Americans in the public school system. In actual fact, I routinely call it the Omaha plantation system. And remember, this is a school district that had a superintendent who still has his name on the building, who practiced segregation like a Confederate. His name should not be on that building, and no one's really dealt with that on a serious matter yet. But also my concern is that the Human Relations Department, which used to be kind of like the facilitator to make sure we had some sense of equity, was abolished by some of the previous administration. I've noticed that they've attacked the number of African-American males. You can't find hardly any of them working in the school district, either as school teachers, administrators, or even in general, because again, they seem to have this hatred for African-American males in terms of the way they behave and act. Someone reminds me of like they're members of the Daughter of the Confederacy. But my question to you as a potential school board member, how can we reverse or address the lack of males inside of a school system that tends to have this certain type of behavior that it deals with Black boys and Black men in such a pejorative, negative fashion that we've seen over the past decade or more?
That's a very good question. It's a very difficult question to answer, but I'll give you my take on it is this. There are two unions in the United States that are potentially the most powerful unions in the country. That's teachers union and police unions. Police are supposed to serve and protect. Teachers are supposed to teach. I find it very interesting that occasionally police are the aggressors and teachers can be found not teaching. Black men have to present themselves in a positive way. I would say it in this way. I asked some of the men in the community, if you want to make a difference in the Omaha public schools, even though you may not have a teaching degree, get yourself vetted by the Omaha public schools so that you can come into the schools and sit and watch and help. Come in as a part-time para to help teachers who are really having a difficult time teaching children because of the poverty that they experience at home, and they're becoming more and more aggressive with one another and the teachers. It's not an easy marriage. So we have to have more presence in the public school systems, not right at this point, all of us try to be teachers, but all of us have to up our game so that we have a presence in that school so that we can lessen the violence in the school, lessen the anxiety in the school, and aid the teachers in trying to attempt them to educate. Now, here's another caveat. 70% of the school in North Omaha are populated by Black and brown. 12% of the teaching staff in Omaha does not mirror the population of the children. You're right. There needs to be more Black teachers, more Black male teachers in the Omaha public schools in the North Omaha community. In order to do that, you have to recruit more, or you have to grow your own. And to grow your own, you have to have young children aspiring to go into teaching. That's not going to happen if they're not going to school. That's not going to happen if they're not being fed the knowledge of themselves, the time, and what must be done. The time that what must be done is that now all of us, parent, they're not absolved from this problem. I don't want to misguide or misdirect anyone. Parents play an integral part in this problem. Parents have to step up. We may not have a lot of free time, but we have a lot of time to do what we want to do. We need to convert that into time to help our children do what they need to do.
Right. Good. Thank you. Many have raised serious issues about district elections. And again, I would argue that we've not been served well by district elections, school board, city council, county commissions. And oftentimes I remember years ago, Karen Shepherd, when she was resigning to move out of town, she says, my greatest regret is leaving the superintendent. I'm like, hold it. You're elected by the people in the community. And so what I've seen is that we have people who, again, are more accountable to their employers, meaning they work for a company or organization, so they bend down and do what they got to do for their employees versus their constituents when they're duly elected by a significant population. We have sometimes who have other interests. Again, they may be on the take of getting some nice little kibbles and bits from someone outside the district. And so my question is, how would you differ from those who are those bought and sold elected officials? And I say that by looking at the data of the community of North Omaha. We've had district elections in many areas for many years, and I don't see the results of having some of these dark faces in high places when I look at the challenge and the chaos. And as Walter Brooks in his book says, genocide that has been practiced in our community. How do we address that? And how will you be different than the rest of the folks that, again, ain't doing their job to help these kids to mature and do what they need to do within the school structure?
My teacher once told us, you can't shame a man if you can't change him unless you can shame him. Now, one of the problems, the biggest problem in election, whether it be at a district level, whatever level you're talking about, Jamal, it's money. Big money buys and pays for seats at any table of government, whether that be a board in a corporation that's in the public arena, whether that's city council, whether that's state senators, whether that's Congress, Senate, and president. All of this is manufactured by big business and big money. And not all of the money is good money. There is some filthy lucre involved. Filthy lucre is dirty money. Dirty money is money that is acquired through means other than honorable. To change that, I mean, I'm not suggesting that we go back to citywide elections and still leave the races to those who can garner the most dollars to get there. Because in order to wage an election, you have to have money, yes. You're not going to get your signs made for free. You're not going to get literature made for free. Nothing is free in America. Everything is for sale. And if you have enough money, you can buy everything you want. That's not true in the African American and the Black community. We have money for things we want, but never, ever do we ever think we have money for things we need.
Right.
So we're impulsive buyers, okay? We don't save because we know very little about the monetary system, and that's getting ready to blow up pretty soon because the federales are putting some restrictions on interest. So that's coming very soon. We have all these man-made disasters, but the biggest disaster is that countrywide children are not being educated, and children are going to be left out of the equation. If you can't educate the children, then there's no other jobs for them. As James Brown said, if you don't work, you can't eat. Good God, you got to get it from the street. So now our children are turning to the street, and things you do in the street are not always nice things.
I got you. We got about 10 minutes or so left, and I want to get to a couple of questions I can. One of the things you talked about was some of the issues that happened at that incident near the Hope Center, and we can drop names out because it's all in the media. And they do some decent work, and they work with people who are ex-offenders, and you name it. So they work with some of the most difficult challenges we face. But my question to you specifically is, what is the most pressing issue affecting the African American community from your perspective?
Drugs. And those drugs are drugs of choice. That's alcohol, Delta 8, which is legal as long as you're 18 years old, cannabis, which is illegal, lack of education about drugs, guns, and apathy.
Wow. In recent months, Brother Melvin, people have been harping and talking about critical race theory. And you hear the politicians, particularly those clowns or folks running for governor, where they say stuff like, critical race theory is this, this, and this. And I suspect none of them or any of them have read any serious books on critical race theory or even the culture, the history of oppression of brown, Black, Asians, Native Americans, particularly Native Americans, where they don't want to teach our history. So my point to you is, what is your perspective of this whole CRT of critical race theories that's been floated out by a lot of politicians?
I understand the question. I don't look at it as critical race theory. I look at it as culturally relevant truth. What are you saying, Bro Melvin? We need to teach Black history 182 days out of every school year. We as a community, we as a people need to accentuate and talk about and teach Black history every day, 365 and 1/4 day each year. Until we do that, our children will not have a solid understanding of who we are, whose we are, and why we were brought on the planet in this dispensation of time to do what? To make sure there's another generation of people that can carry on the knowledge of self and the knowledge of what must be done. That's not happening. And the people who fear critical race theory, that's what they call gaslighting. They think that that's going to change the dynamics that they've set up. Well, the dynamics was written in 1776 when the Constitution was written, and you classified Black people as 3/5 of a human simply to deny others a seat at the table. And you haven't changed that. And so until you change that, that's the biggest sin that America has created, and they must live with unless they want to do right and change the Constitution. That's not going to happen. So they'll continue to hold fast on trying to say we're racist, but we have no power to do anything other than hurt ourselves.
Gotcha. There's recently there's been plenty of public and private funds being pumped into North Omaha. Habitat for Humanity, I understand, recently got $11 million locally from the wife of the former wife of the guy who owns Amazon, the billionaire who's got so much money he could buy half the population. There are many donations coming in. There was just recently legislation that was passed that will bring money into North Omaha and South Omaha. And my question is, in terms of most of those funds probably will not touch the hands of the very people they intended for. And my question basically too is, it's going to be a lot of prison system to get those money. But what is your prediction of those monies that are being earmarked? And can we be more optimistic about it in light of what historically all the money that have come in have not really changed the scope of the income of many of the low income African Americans, whites, and folks in North Omaha? So what is your prediction of all these funds coming in? What do you think is going to happen, Brother Melvin?
History is best qualified to reward our research. Our research will tell you that historically they have never reached us. Why have it that way? Jamal, it's simple. Are we qualified to garner that kind of money? Do we have the certifications? Are we educated enough to do the job, to bid for the job, and to get the money? We have intelligent grant writers, yes. But when it comes to getting money, why the African-American contractors are not getting the money is based on technicalities and whether or not the applications were properly vetted, properly filled out. And then you have these gatekeepers who hold back money from certain organizations that could do the job, but refuse to allow them to get the support to get the contract. So that has to be stopped.
Wow. You know, the other thing was with the governor rejecting money that would help housing. We're only 1 or 2 states. It's kind of amazing that in this day and age, a governor or elected official would turn down federal money because of his personality or his, I want to call it his agenda on something else. I bet if they were asking money for how to help, let's say, provide money for the death penalty and to kill people, he would jump on that. Obviously, he used his own money to help fund that whole process, or at least he navigated money to do that. But my question is basically, how do we address that? And again, history, as you said, is a predictor of that. You're participating on Facebook and you are out there in the community, many conversations. Why is Facebook so important to many of us as African Americans, even though we don't have any stock in it? And they can, as Reverend Sanders says, they put him in Facebook jail and he wouldn't let him come out because he put some Trump thing that might have been anti-Trump. And I'm like, well, how do you put a reverend in a Facebook jail? I mean, is this a letter from a Birmingham jail by Martin Luther King? So I found it humorous when he said they basically kicked him off and they let him work, but then he came back out. But again, talk to me about this Facebook stuff that we have this a fetish with as African Americans, and all the comments and silly stuff and some good stuff we post on there. Talk to me about that. And you're an avid producer on Facebook. I noticed that with a lot of the trends and things that you're about. Talk to me.
What I'm pushing on Facebook is knowledge. Why use a worldwide avenue to put frivolous things on it? What I'm telling you, brother, it's the proper handling of people. We get on Facebook and we dog out everybody, including ourselves. We're not doing very much to uplift ourselves, our children, our people, our elderly. Facebook, it was originally started by the Defense Department. That's where that all came in. So they allowed us in. And what do we do with it? We don't teach anything other than I'm using it as a teaching tool, but the problem is we're not using it for education. We're using it for fun and entertainment. And this world is full of fun and entertainment. And that's why we're at the bottom of the poll.
Right. No, I hear you. And I think that's one of the conversations we need to have, because I noticed that Creighton their reconciliation group is working on the lynching of George Smith or Cole or way back in the 1800s. I'm like, what about Richard Kellum and all the stuff that just came out on Adam Fletcher's page where he talk about all these folks who've killed in mysterious or crazy circumstances by the Omaha Police Department.
Well,
so when you see Negroes involved in escapism and trivialities and just putting stupid stuff out there, it's like it's a reflection of their mentality. And again, I can't engage people who have cognitive deficiencies on a certain level because again, it'd be wasting my time. But yeah, you raised some valid points there.
I don't understand how you get in Facebook jail. Facebook warned me once about a photograph that I showed. And I figured, okay, that means I can't do that. So rather than saying something or revealing something that is disparaging and maybe harmful to everyone, then I just engage in education. I drop it on it like it's hot. I don't talk about people. My teacher says, don't attack people, attack policy. It's the policies of people that really run havoc in the circle and in the world that we live in. They only do it because they're allowed to do it.
Gotcha.
So bust up the policy, and then you'll bust up the mentality that says it's okay for me to do it.
Right. Well, two things hit me as you were saying this, Brother Melvin, is one white guy, former teacher, said, you don't have time to read out some of the posts that I put related to educational articles I've read or whatever. And I don't always read entirely all of them, but I can read 3/4 of them speed reading is best. And some of them have to deal with African folks and stuff that we don't get on the local racist newspapers and television stations that don't cover us unless we're involved in a crime or sports thing. So I'm not saying you got to read everything that we post out there for education, because again, there's so much knowledge out there that you can spend a lifetime just seeking it and you still won't get half of it, as we say, or just a drop of water in the ocean. The second thing is related to this is I saw a couple of women who are lesbians and the LGBTQ, or as Dave Chappelle called them, alphabet people, said that the way to deal with some of the issues related to pregnancy or issues of birth and so on is to get rid of the penis. Well, I didn't find that funny. They thought it was a joke. And again, somebody translated and said, no, they were just being funny. But when you look at the number of African Americans who've been castrated, who've been lynched and all like that, we're traumatized when you talk about removing penises from Black men. And again, it shows that these white women are, I would call them daughters of the Confederacy, are part of that group. They just have never been around people who've been traumatized. I would not make fun of the Holocaust or certain things because they're taboo topics. I understand that comedians get paid to do that. But I think that when you put your stuff on Facebook, you open yourself up to some of the same scrutinies that you talked about earlier. We're down to like the end of the show, and I want to give you a chance. Do you have any, Brother Melvin, any closing comments for our viewing audience out here?
No, I would say this. You never got to the question of why I'm running. And so I'm running because back in 2021, I heard a song. I'm not going to advertise the name of the song nor the artist, but I saw this performed on a stage where thousands of children were listening to it. And if I tell you the words, everybody will know what I'm talking about. I'm willing to talk about that at another time we can talk. The artist said, young, dumb, and broke. High school children was the tagline in the song. And I listened to it and I kept listening to it. Young, dumb, and broke, high school children. That fits right into this dispensation of time with our children. That's the way they feel, Black and white. And the stadium was full, just as full as Black and just as full as white, Latino, all the rainbow was there. I won't speak in terms of being critical about anyone's belief factor or what their lifestyle. It's theirs, it's not mine. I'm not going to be critical of what you do. I just don't want you harming children in the process of doing it. So that's the way I would end it.
Appreciate it, Brother Melvin. Appreciate Melvin Muhammad. It's been a pleasure. I've known you for many years, and thanks for coming on our more program as we throw down some heavy light, and hope we can have you back again. Take care. And we
appreciate it, sir.
We always say Baroko, which means good night in Setswana, and hopefully the force may be with you.
Peace and blessings. Thank you.